Hey guys, good morning and welcome to Monday Mornings with Michael. That's me. Today is March 21st, 2022, and let us just say happy spring. Yesterday was the start of spring. If you did not know, I feel like a lot of people did not know. And guess what? Even my phone, it does not say it on the little calendar on the phone, which they list literally every other like weird and obscure holiday, but they don't mention that it is spring. So if you didn't know, now you do, now you know. Today is, well, I guess yesterday was first day of spring, but today is the 21st. So we're excited to get going. We hope after this last week you have finally caught up on your 1 hour of lost sleep. I know it hit a lot of people quite harshly for some reason. I guess it just goes to show that people like their sleep, which we all kind of know, but hopefully you have gotten lots of naps, lots of good food, and time to relax, especially after this weekend. Got to go outside, enjoy the weather because it is springtime, especially here on the West Coast. The weather is getting really nice, and I think even later this week it's supposed to be in the 80s, which is insane for it still being March. But let's jump right in. Well, I guess we were going to say too, with spring, the other really exciting thing is that there are going to be flowers everywhere, vegetables everywhere. If you are into any sort of planting yourself, then start looking stuff up and get going because it is just about to be planting season. I know where I'm at, we usually plant things on Earth Day, which is in April. So we have a couple weeks to go. But if you're growing anything from a seed, then you're going to want to start now because a lot of times we get the few inch plants, and that is a good start if you want to have a higher success rate of not killing your flowers or your vegetables, whatever it may be. We are growing from seed though some zinnias, which are flowers, and we'll see how that goes. It takes about 7 to 10 days before you see anything. So right now we're just seeing dirt. So we will see with that, but that is something exciting that's going to be coming. But also, I guess the flip side of that is if you have allergies, good luck right now. I would just say start taking your allergy medicine if you take it. I usually don't have bad allergies, but already I can tell, like, just at 4 a.m. in the morning, my nose is plugged, and then I get up, and then the back of my throat is itchy, and that's just from sleeping. That's from doing nothing. And then, let alone when you go outside, and then you just see, like, the wind blowing, and you can see the particles in the air, and you're just like, okay, if I can see them in the air, then this is bad news because it means like it's not just the super sensitive people with allergies. It means everybody is just going to be sneezing, blowing their nose, especially coming off of, all these lockdowns. And where I'm at, like, you don't have to wear masks anymore. If anyone shows a hint of a cold, people are just like, it's starting again. Put on your mask, get more shots, just funny stuff with that. So it's one of those, like, remember people, allergies are real, and we're all gonna, hopefully you don't get them, but if you do, I'm there with you with a scratchy, itchy throat and nose and needing a tissue. It's not fun. But from there, our podcast, we have made 78 cents so far, so we are getting closer and closer to our goal of $1. That's right. It'll probably still be, 2 to 3 weeks before we get there, depending on, I guess, you guys and how many of you listen to the podcast. But it is exciting to see it slowly getting higher and higher. I think that's kind of the overarching theme with at least this business and the podcast, but I feel like most businesses or creative projects you start is that, it does take time. It's like a slow and steady, which to me is annoying because I like the fast, like, let's go. Like, put it into gear, go, 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 go. But this is one of those things where you need patience, and we have it. We're getting more patient as we go, and just kind of figuring out, like, what does this mean, and going through everything. One term we did find though this past week was the term, like, pod fade, which is just a stupid term, but it's the idea, like, with a lot of, like, creative projects you do, or maybe even businesses you do, like, you start out super, super excited, and you're like, this is awesome, it's going to be so great, and that you can usually hold up the enthusiasm for a couple weeks, and then after that, you kind of hit a stopping, and then you either plateau or you start to decline. And that's kind of a trend that's very popular with podcasts, really with anything. If you're a writer, you're like, I'm gonna write every day, and then you're like, oh, I'm not as excited about writing this, or I'm gonna post this every single day. And so it's definitely not a new trend, not something that we haven't heard of type of a thing, but we do want to keep track of that and make sure we don't get to where we are not liking to do it or not having like the enthusiasm or energy to do it. This past week, kind of what we did as a way to test that out was we did a shorter episode, so it was just a 30-minute episode, and we called it like a conversation starter episode. So rather than try to cover like one topic in full, we went ahead and we're like, we're just going to start the conversation here, and it was about networking, because as I've said on the show, we talk about that a lot, and this is a fun place to talk about that. But we wanted to share some of that on the podcast to get people going and just to share a little bit of what we learned so far. But being about the networking topic in general, we know like we're going to learn so much more. So like we don't want to try to cover it all because we're still like literally learning this week. We're going to have more calls, and I don't think meetups, but I am going to share the story of like the crazy meetup that I had last week, a week ago. So that was something new we started with the podcast, just as a way to keep it short and kind of, if we need to, it doesn't have to be like, oh my gosh, we have to put so much into one topic / we have to find topics, because if you didn't know, the first couple weeks, and I think that's why with a lot of content or any sort of project you do, like you have, say this much of a jar of content, and then you're going through and you're like, oh no, we're getting to the bottom, and I'm just going, and we're just going that there's not necessarily as much time to like fill back up the jar with ideas or really just living life. I've seen that myself when I've done like singing, songwriting, writing a musical, all of that. Like you put so much into one thing and you're like, okay, I'm depleted. I need to go and step away for a couple weeks, a couple months, maybe a year. I feel like musicals are a bit different in that. But musical projects in general, where you're like, I need to live a little bit more so I can rebuild everything. So we don't necessarily want to get there with the podcast because we want to keep going with that. But that was something that we tried out, and it was pretty fun just doing a short episode. It was a lot less like, oh, we have a lot to do type of a thing. But that leads us to, once we get to the business interviews, it is going to be super fun, and that will help keep things going. It'll bring new listeners. So if you know anyone in the United States who has their own small shop, their small business, they have an online presence so that they can sell via online and ship it to anywhere, then let them know that we're looking for them to interview. It should be really fun. So last week we mentioned we're going to make a reel promoting that. We did do it, so yes, we did that. Hooray. And then we made another reel that went along with our business article. So that's another strategy that we're using, just because social media likes when you use their little tools and they want you to always stay on their site. So we're like, you know what, we're gonna do it. So that should be a fun way kind of going forward and making sure we have at least one reel a week to go along with the business article, and then continued with looking for people to interview will be that reel, and kind of going from there we'll look and see how things are going with that. But we'll get to the networking side of things. So I mentioned last week, and I mentioned this on the podcast, so if you're finding this video later on from the podcast, yes, we're going to get to the story of the not so great meetup, what I would call kind of a nightmare for a meetup. But I had talked with, so let's start from the beginning. As you know, from the last few weeks, we've been using the Bumble app, which is, yes, a dating app, but they have 3 different sections. You can look for the dating, a best friend, or business. So we've been using this one, the pinky one, the business side, to do networking. It is really helpful, really convenient, matches you up with people in your area. You can use a travel mode. So if you're like, I'm sick of the people here, we are going to go far away across the country, then you'll show up and say New York with everyone else who lives in New York. So that has been really helpful. We've had some pretty good conversations. If you both match up, then you both like say, we like the other person. I mean, it's not necessarily you like them because you're not dating them, thank goodness. But if you both match up, then you can start talking with one another. And they have a phone call feature right within the app. You can also video call. So that has been really nice, that you don't have to give out all of your information. You can just say, hey, do you want to jump on a call? Cool, let's do it through the app. Boom, talk to them right away using internet calling. So we did that with one person. We chatted with them. They said, hey, you want to jump on a call? Sure. Okay, talked on a call. It was like a 20-minute call, which is pretty short for even an intro call, I would say. It's usually probably about an hour, and an hour is short if you like to talk and can talk, and because you're trying to like cram all of your life within a very short amount of time, which is very hard to do. So it was like a 20-minute call, and they're like, oh, I have another call coming through, I gotta go, bye. And then last Monday, I got a text message, because they actually did have my number. That was before I realized you could call through the app. So learn from me, protect your phone numbers. Of this person who was like, hey, I'm in San Jose, I'm where you are, do you want to meet at a shop? And I'm like, okay. And I was like gonna say like, hey, let's go to Starbucks, because there's one right near my house. I can walk there. If you didn't know, gas prices right now are insane, so I'm like, I don't really want to drive, I want to save the gas in my car. So if they don't have a spot, I'm going to suggest this. Turns out they were already at a spot in East San Jose, which is not typically the nicest part of town. I don't know if it's everywhere, but most places, the east side is not really a place you'd want to be or hang out, unless you were looking to get into a life of crime or join a gang, maybe. Or if you want to get shot up. Okay, that's a little bit too far maybe. So anyways, not the nicest part. It is getting nicer, so it's not like super dramatic. But they're at a coffee shop. I'm like, oh, okay, that's fine. And then the thing that I missed was that they said, it's a coffee shop with sexy Vietnamese women. Are you okay with that? And for me, I had never heard anything about this, which I'll go into. But all I thought he meant was that there are attractive baristas. And I'm like, that's kind of a weird question to ask. Like, it's like, do you mind going to this coffee shop? There's a bunch of ugly people. I hope they don't offend you. They're just not very good looking. So I thought it was the flip side of that, of like, they're just good looking people. So I was just like, okay, you're already there. I'll just go there. It's like 15 minutes away. I show up though. And what he meant by that is that the waiters, it was like a Hooters. Basically, the waitresses had hardly any clothes on, just an itty bitty little top. Their butt cheeks were completely hanging out, and the guy, I never met him in person, he had told me like, I'm wearing a dark colored shirt. I walk in, the lights are already dim, the shades are all down around it, and I am completely out of place because I have like a nice button-up shirt with khakis and like boat shoes, I think you call them, and I'm like, everyone is wearing dark clothing. So I'm like looking around, kind of taking everything like, oh, she's not wearing clothes. She's also not wearing very much clothes. And then all these creepy old men are like staring at me as if I'm the weird one, because I'm trying to make eye contact with them to see like, who am I meeting here? Like, first, where am I? And you told me the wrong directions of who you were and what you looked like. Finally, a guy pops up, and he looks completely different from the photos that were on the app. So it was that weird mix of like, is this you? And I kept repeating his name. I'm like, you're so-and-so, right? And yes. And we sit down, and the whole time I was just like, almost like that weird feeling. And I haven't done, online dating to the extent where you meet someone up and they look completely different from their photos, or you're catfished. So if you have done that, I know maybe like this much more about how you would feel, because I was like, you are like 20, maybe 30 years older than the photos you put. Like, yes, it's you, but you look nothing like that. And I have to say, I do change my appearance a lot. So like now I have a mustache and facial hair and this type of hair, but that'll change every few weeks. But I still like essentially look like the photos that I have. And I usually put a couple different photos so you can tell like I changed my looks somewhat. So that was getting into the meeting of just like, oh my gosh, we're at a business networking meetup, and we're almost like in a nightclub / strip club. Not quite the strip club, because they weren't taking off their clothes. They just hardly had any clothes on. And so the lighting was dim, which is already kind of weird. I mean, it's not weird for the location. And then there was this like booming music, boons, 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 boons. So we're trying to talk about like his experience in business as an entrepreneur, and then mine. And it was just a mess. I ordered like a smoothie. They didn't have menus. So the woman was trying to like, we have this, and I was just like, I just want you to go away. Smoothie, like strawberry smoothie, please. And then they brought me water, but it was kind of a ways after, so I thought the water was supposed to be the smoothie, and I was just like, you guys are hardly wearing any clothes and you don't know how to make a smoothie? Like, this is not a coffee shop at all. Then they did bring the smoothie, so they do know how to make smoothies. It was itty bitty, cost a ton of money, but we'll get to that. Anyways, the meeting was just super weird, very uncomfortable. Just, I don't know, to me, like, that's just not a good place to meet up. It just seemed very inappropriate, unprofessional, and just knowing I'm like, the clientele that come here are like, not typically people I'd want to hang out with as me as a person, but also not people I'd want to do business with, if that makes sense. But it turns out, talk, back and forth. He wanted to like mentor me as an entrepreneur. He didn't really have his own business. It's a concept, and people pay millions of dollars for concepts. So I'm still developing my concept, and I don't know. It was just so weird. And he wanted 10% equity in this company, Fisher Philbrick, which, as you know, we have not even hit $1 yet. So I was like, okay, and you already want part of my company, of this company, and wanted to mentor, and he did a lot of energy coaching, and then it started getting into like, he's going to share a part of his brain with me through coaching, I think energy coaching maybe, and then we'll have shared vision and shared brains and just go throughout the problems together, and I'll be able to think like him because I have a part of his brain in me. I don't know, I kind of tuned out, and it was like, this is getting weird. Like, not that the whole thing wasn't weird, because yes, it was already very weird and uncomfortable, but it just got into like, oh, and I had said I could meet up for an hour, which is always good, something you can learn, like set a time before, but the problem was I didn't have a watch on, and my phone was in my pocket, and if you've been at meetings, it's very rude to like pull out your phone and be like, what time is it? But I had like a sense, I'm like, I feel like we've been here an hour. I was just like a few minutes off, so like the conversation had died down. I'm like, well, thanks so much. It was nice meeting you. I'll think about it. And I was just like, oh, I know I don't. And I went up to pay, and they don't have a menu, so you didn't know the prices. It was cash only. I had brought like a couple bucks because I thought I was going to a coffee shop, and I'm like, it can't be more than like $10, right? And then the ladies were speaking Vietnamese, so I couldn't understand, which means they probably were just making up whatever. Like, these people look like they have money, charge them this. And then I didn't have enough cash, and they're like, cash only, baby. So the guy who he had to pay for it, which he told me he had lots of money. Who knows if that's true or not. But he ended up paying for it, and then I just got out of there. It was so weird, you guys, though. But here's what we learned. Set a time limit so that if you do need to get out of there, you can get out of there when you need to. Choose a location that you both have heard of and that you know. So maybe a big chain place would be better. I mean, not to dog on mom and pop shops, because if you know it's a good like establishment and actually a coffee place, then that's okay. But that was a thing, like, I just had no idea, and it turns out those shops are actually like borderline illegal at nighttime. There's a lot of like sketchy things that happen as far as like gambling, probably prostitution, could be like sex trafficking. Like, the more I talk to people about this experience, the more like horrorsome, not like a nightmare, it really became, of like, what was I even doing there? Why did he invite me? Why did he think I'd want to meet there? And then these poor women and these creepy guys, and just like, oh, it just got worse and worse. So that was like my first meetup with someone, and I would say it was not good. So from there, it was like, okay, how do we make sure that never happens again with the networking, which are some of those reasons we mentioned, of like, I don't know, just making sure you know where to meet. And maybe really just keep the first couple conversations to a phone call to figure out what they want. Because if he had told me from the beginning, like, I want part of your company to mentor you with my brain, then I would have been like, oh, very interesting, but I'm not interested. Like, thanks, but no thank you. So that is that story. I'm sure there's a lot more, but we're going to get to wrapping this up because we are almost done for today. But yeah, wow, it's a lot to come after that. But kind of what we want to leave you with to get you ready for this new week, this Monday, is that, one, like we always say, like, it's a happy Monday, so don't be sad or discouraged that you have to start over. You know that like, oh, it's another work week. B, yes, we are excited to go, ready to go. Having a positive and optimistic mindset is really going to get you so far in life, and especially on these Monday mornings when likely maybe you do want to sleep, you do want to stay at home, you don't want to put on clothes and leave the house, but tell yourself, no, like I want to do this, right, and eventually that'll seep through. And smiling actually really helps too. It tricks your body into thinking you are happy. So even if you're not, just walk around with a stupid smile on your face and it will slowly seep through. But the overall thought that we want to leave you with is taking time to look back at yourself and taking time to appreciate like how far you've come and where you've come from, and really finding a way to be proud of yourself, because that was something that myself yesterday I do or have done a lot of like singing, songwriting, and performing. And I was looking through my YouTube channel, which started, I don't know, when I was a junior in high school. So there's some really old stuff and stuff where you're just like, I didn't take this down. I'm pretty sure I should have taken that down. But anyways, I looked through it, and some of the performances, like I performed at the baccalaureate in high school, which was the biggest crowd I'd ever performed for, around I think 1,000 people, a part of like the graduating ceremony like 2 nights before you graduated. And I was like, wow, I did this. Like I knew I did this, but I hadn't listened to it for years. I'm like, oh, it's not as bad as I thought. And wow, I was really brave to volunteer myself to do that. And I wrote a whole song for that, and I played a grand piano on a stage that I never played that piano before until, getting there that day for a sound check. So all of these things, I'm like, I don't even know if I would do that now, but like, good job, Michael. Like, way to go. And then for my college graduation, I sang at that too, for the department one. So it wasn't thousands of people, it was probably a couple hundred, because it was just like the kids, in the hospitality program with their parents. But that was on a ukulele, and I was like, oh, that song I was not as fond of. I don't know. It's not great. But still then too, I was like, I had never played a ukulele in front of a crowd that big with a microphone. And I had just given a speech, I think. I spoke and then sang. So my mouth was like crazy dry, and I brought water, but it was in like a crazy like twisted water bottle, and I couldn't get it undone. So I'm like, we just have to start singing. So a lot of that too, though, I was like, even though, I'm not fond of it now, it was as good as I could do at the time. And also like, would I do that now? I'm not sure. So from that, I thought I just had this idea of like, wow, it is really like helpful and beneficial to take the time and look back and be like, where did I come from? What was I doing? Even like the college one was just a few years ago. High school was many, many years ago. And being like, wow, I've come such a far way. And like, good for me for being who I was back then, but also growing and getting better and changing throughout life, because as life comes, you grow and change comes at you. You can't help that. But kind of seeing yourself and being like, where am I now? And like celebrating that, like, wow, I've had good times. Maybe you've had bad times. And like, but knowing that who I was back then and the things that I've come into have really made me who I am today. And that is something to be happy about, something to celebrate, be joyous about. And also knowing that maybe if you're not in the best place right now, that is just a part of life too. Like you never know, in a couple weeks, a couple months, maybe a year later, you'll be like, I was in a really bad spot, but like, now look at me, that strengthened me so that I could go out and do what I need to do right now, today, for this week, for this year. So we'll end it with that, but we would challenge you to take the time, look back. If you have photo albums or home videos or a really old YouTube account where you've posted things that you should probably take down, go through those, look through those, see who you were, your accomplishments, what you did. If there is anything like cringeworthy, here's what you tell yourself. I did the best I could at the time with what I had and what I was given. So that'll help soften the blow a bit when you're just like, oh, what was I doing? But take time, go through all that, see who you are back then, be proud of yourself today as well, and know that the new week has started, and we wish you the best Monday you could ever have. Happy Monday. We will be talking to you guys soon. Have a great day.